Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Baker, the voice of the Red Hawks. Honored to be joined here by Miami legend, NBA legend, professional basketball, all levels of basketball legend. Wayne Embry joins us. And Wayne, thanks for taking some time to spend here with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Good to be back on campus.
Absolutely. We're great to have you back. And that's what I want to start with. A Tecumseh High School graduate, Springfield, Ohio. What brought you to this campus initially?
Well, it's very interesting. I grew up in a small farm outside of Springfield, Ohio. Went to Tecumseh High School, and I listened to University of Dayton games. So it was only natural that when I graduated, I wanted to go to the University of Dayton.
Right.
And that's all I knew. And of course, I didn't know much about the recruiting process. My high school coach introduced me to several Ohio State alumni and tried to push me toward Ohio State. And I made several visits to Ohio State, and it's just too big for me.
Yeah?
Just too big.
Understand.
And so I get a call from Miami. Bill Rohr was the coach here at the time, and he drove up to our little farm to visit and talk nothing but academics during the visit. And finally, on the way out, he says, "Oh, by the way, our basketball team's been pretty good, and we're going to play in Florida next year." And of course, I hadn't traveled out of the state of Ohio, so he invited me down for a visit. And I came down for a visit and fell in love with the campus. And spent time, of course, in his office at Withrow Court.
Right.
And then when I walked down the hall, he pointed out Paul Brown, Woody Hayes, Wee Eubank, Red Blake, Paul Dietzel, all those greats that came out of Miami of Ohio.
Right.
And so that experience inspired me. So that's how I wound up here.
Very good. Graduated in '58 from Miami University. Tell me, in your time here, some of your best memories or best moments of Miami.
Well, of course, the student experiences was terrific. In the dorm and in the classroom, and that was fun. But to participate in intercollegiate athletics at this level was just terrific, and we were able to win games, win the conference several times, participate in NC2A. Went to the regional tournaments, got beat by Kentucky, but all that was fun, and it was just a great experience.
Certainly some of the glory days of Miami basketball during those years when you played here. You talked about playing in the NCAA tournament, playing against Kentucky, and those were some really fine teams that you were playing on.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, and we had a terrific team. And so going to the NCAA tournament was quite big for us, and we weren't going to beat Kentucky.
Right.
They were on one.
Right.
But that was a great experience for us.
Yeah. Tell me about, obviously you have been in basketball your entire life. Tell me about the style of play when you were playing here. Everybody's, we were joking who's the greatest player ever when we were coming in here. Coach Owens was talking about it, but the style of play through the years, it makes it difficult to pick the greatest player, I'm sure, and it was certainly different when you were playing the game at Miami than it is now.
Well, the style of play certainly has changed, but through the years, there's been changes, but nothing as drastic as we see today.
Right.
Whereas almost the elimination of the big man, the post player, which, of course, is much to my dismay because
absolutely.
I was a post player. But I think through generations of basketball players and that, you had the development of the bigs like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, and who dominated the game. It was Lou Alcindor, Kareem AbdulJabbar. They dominated the game. But the master of the game was Oscar Robertson.
Oh, yeah.
He could do it all. And Michael Jordan is terrific. LeBron's terrific, but no disrespect to them. But the greatest player, in my opinion, that played the game was Oscar Robertson.
Absolutely. 1958, you graduate from Miami. You enter the NBA draft. You're drafted by St. Louis. Move all around, but tell us about that initial draft. Obviously, that has changed as well in the scope of the draft and everything. But had to be just one of the best moments of your life to hear that you were drafted by St. Louis.
Well, it was, and I didn't really know that much about it because I grew up not knowing if I could play in the NBA.
Right.
And I aspired to play for the Globetrotters. And so I went to a North-South All-Star game in Raleigh, North Carolina, I believe my senior year here at Miami. And Joe Lapchick, the legendary Joe Lapchick, was our coach. And so after a couple of practices, he says, "Wayne, you got NBA talent. I'm going to see if I can get the Knicks to draft you." And so that kind of enlivened me a little bit.
Right.
And so draft day, I get a call from St. Louis, and they said they had drafted me in the 3rd round. So I was kind of excited about that. Several days later, I get a call saying that I've been traded to Cincinnati.
Quickly moved, right?
Quickly moved, but that was great, though, because, it was close to home back in Ohio. So I welcomed that trade. And so I spent 8 years with the Cincinnati Royals.
Yep. And then the Bucks, the Celtics, where you won the championship with the Celtics. I want to go through some of those days. I was telling Coach before we sat down to do this interview, I said the first NBA game that I remember seeing as a child was at the Gardens in Cincinnati, and you mentioned Oscar, Nate Tiny Archibald, Wilt Chamberlain, and Jerry West were all on the floor. And I mean, it was just incredible. And that style of player, whatever you want to call it, in those days, there were just so many great players on each of these teams. It was a very, very competitive NBA at the time.
It was. There weren't, of course, as many teams.
Right.
And there were great, now Hall of Fame players that played during that era. And, wow, you named some great ones just then.
As a kid, I mean, it made me love the game even more.
But, each team had a couple of potential Hall of Famers. The Boston Celtics had, 5 Hall of Famers?
Yeah.
So.
Tell me about your playing days there. You were known as the Wall, in the NBA, and, you were in my mind, one of the best to play in the position there.
Well, I was undersized center.
Sure.
And so the way I was able to compensate was I was physically strong, so I used my strength, but also developed the pick and roll with Oscar, and we executed that quite well. And so when I got traded to Boston, because of my history of setting a strong pick, Johnny Most, the broadcaster, nicknamed me the Wall.
The Wall.
And so I became Wayne the Wall.
Huh. And it certainly paid off for you with that championship with Boston.
Well, that was what we play for.
Yeah, absolutely.
To win the World Championship.
1968, the World Championship, and again, played from 1959 to 1969. And then, I was going through the bio and everything, Wayne, and there's just so many firsts to be listed. But when you were named general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks, first African-American general manager in NBA history, as well as the first black general manager of a team of any major U.S. sport. And I know what that meant to you to become that person, and really just a fine career with the Bucks and then the Cavaliers down the stretch.
Well, quite honestly, I hadn't thought of even becoming a general manager. I thought that when Milwaukee asked me to come back in the front office, they gave me the title assistant to the president, but really what I was a scout.
Right.
And I thought that was probably as high as I'd ever get. And lo and behold, a year later, the owner calls me and says, "I want to meet you in my office at 4 o'clock." And I walked in and he says, "Have a seat." I sat down. He says, "You're the new general manager of the Milwaukee Bucks." And I just sat there stunned.
I was going to say, you had to be stunned.
Yeah. So finally I responded by saying, "What happened to the general manager?" He says, "Well, he took a job in Houston." I said, "Wow."
Wow.
He said, "Well, you are the new general manager." And so, I said, wow, I had some doubts, because I was I was 32 years old.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me that I went to Miami University.
Yeah.
Paul Brown, Woody Hayes, Paul Dietzel, all those names I mentioned earlier.
Right.
Says, I have the same background, same education, the same experiences they had.
Right.
So I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely, and you did it very well there. With the Bucks, ran into a young man, Kareem AbdulJabbar, Lou Alcindor, and really, kept him in the game. I read somewhere where it was a little difficult for him, and I know you had a chat with him, and really encouraged him to really get into the game and delve into the game.
Well, I met Kareem years ago. He rode with me in a car up to Catcher's Country Club, where we would play the Embry Stokes game every year. But no, I think Kareem was pretty well developed at the time.
Sure.
He got to Milwaukee. He's one of the all-time greats, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And for a big to be able to dribble and pass and do the things he did is just unbelievable. But there were times he'd get discouraged, and there were some issues that he had to work his way through with the tragic thing that happened in Washington, and with his house there and some things. But we had a good relationship, I thought, when we were together in Milwaukee.
Vice President and General Manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers from 1985 to 1992, and that may have been in that time when I first met you. And Miami at the time had a guy named Ron Harper that I knew that you thought was pretty special.
We drafted Ron with the 8th pick. It's been a couple of years with us in Cleveland, and he's a tremendous basketball player.
Yeah.
Just a great player. In my opinion, probably the best player to play at Miami. And he went on to have a distinguished NBA career, and hopefully he's a Hall of Famer one of these days.
Absolutely. It's he's got 5 of those rings to go around from his days with the Lakers and the Chicago Bulls. And you were the vice president and general manager there, and went on to become the first African American NBA team president with the Cavaliers in 1994. And 45 average 45 wins, 9 playoff appearances, and 12 seasons. And that's really doing something with the program, and with the Cavaliers, it was really special.
Well, we had some very special teams there, very special players, individuals. Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance. Those guys were just terrific people, and we were able to get some things done, and just couldn't beat the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just couldn't overcome Michael's greatness.
Yeah, Michael Jordan and that team, and obviously Ron went on to be a part of that. But that was just some really special teams by Chicago. You remember the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame? Remember that charter class, 2013 recipient of the Ohio Heritage Award, the Naismith Hall of Fame, and the College Basketball Hall of Fame, and just such an amazing career. When you look back on it, we've talked through some of the highlights, but what are some of the true highlights when you look back and say this was a really special thing that in my career?
Well, of course, as a player, winning the championship when I was with Boston, that's why we play. And then the challenge of putting together a championship team in the front office. And so I was in the front office when we won the championship in Milwaukee. And then when we got back in the finals in '74, those were highlights. And, of course, being enshrined into the Hall of Fame, you go along doing things in your career, you never know where it's going to take you.
Mm-hmm.
But to finish your career and all of a sudden you get the call that you've been selected into the Basketball Hall of Fame, that's a special feeling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and just an exceptional career, and an author as well. Take me through, and obviously you've seen every kind of basketball, every style of basketball. How has not only the game changed, but maybe management as well? You've been, a big part of management and a president of a team. How has that changed through the years that, to take us to where the NBA is today?
Well, over the post-60s to the 70s was a big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what was going on in our country.
In the country, yeah.
We had the civil rights movement, we had the anti-war movement, the protesters, the hippie movement,
Mm-hmm.
And of course the drug culture was very much a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to deal with those issues. We weren't immune to it.
Right.
In the NBA. We had to deal with those issues to restore the confidence in our fans, that their teams were clean and teams of character. And so on a people level, those were big challenges. Mm-hmm. The game, we had the more bigs come into the game, more big centers and big forwards, and it was dominated by bigs. But now, fast forward to where we are today, bigs are being kind of eliminated unless they can make 3-point shots.
Right.
Much to my dismay, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, you see how guys like LeBron James, obviously one of the best ones to play the game, and even at the college level now, heralding Zion Williamson as a true freshman just out of high school, plays for Duke, that he's going to be the next one, yeah. And certainly looks like it. And, I personally long for the days when we had big men out there on the floor and dominating the floor. I thought the game was much better at that time.
Yeah, well, it's changed, and a lot of that is due to analytics.
Yeah.
We have analytics in the game today.
Yeah.
But, I'm bold to say that analytics has always been a part of my game because you know where strengths and weaknesses are, and you should.
Right.
And I don't need to have numbers tell me what I'm looking at, what I'm watching.
Right, exactly. Obviously being honored, at the game against Ohio University and actually Wayne Embry Day. And you've mentioned a couple of times hearkening back to that education that Bill Rohr talked to you about when he visited your house. And it's great to have you back here. What does a day like this mean to you at this stage of your career?
Well, at this stage of my life.
Yeah,
it's just great because what I do now and accept now in the way of honors or any recognition is hoping that it inspires the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this, and it's always a pleasure to sit down with Miami legends, and I'm sitting here with probably the biggest Miami legend ever, Wayne Embry.
Literally.
Well, literally, yes, but figuratively as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, yeah.